What does it mean to wear your values out loud? Today we're talking about fashion, disability culture, pride, and the power of community. We're also looking at how clothing can become more than something special we put on. It can be a message, a form of care, and a way to say we're still here.
Welcome to Disability Deep Dive. I'm Keith.
And I'm Jodi.
Today we're talking with Meier Galblum Haigh, Executive Director of Disability Culture Lab. Disability Culture Lab's summer collection, We're Still Here, Fashion Against Fascism, was shaped by conversations with more than 40 people with disabilities about community, joy, safety, and what disabled liberation can look like.
The collection features work by disabled artists and designers, with messages that speak to pride, connection, and the right of people with disabilities to be seen, valued, and protected. It reminds us that disability culture is creative, powerful, and very much alive.
Yes, indeed. Let's dive in with Meier Galblum Haigh. Before we jump in, I'm Keith. I'm a white man with brown eyes, brown hair, and a graying beard. I'm wearing a black shirt with a blue pattern.
And I'm Jodi, a white woman with dark blonde hair, and I'm wearing a red and white striped shirt.
Meier, if you're comfortable, we'd love to invite you to visually describe yourself for our listeners as well.
Hi, yes. I am Meier, and I am a white trans masc human, and I am wearing a black t-shirt and glasses, and I have short, dark, curly hair.
Great.
Cool.
So to start us off, could you introduce yourself to our listeners and maybe share a little bit about the work you do as the Executive Director of Disability Culture Lab?
Yes, I can. Well, first off, just thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'll start off just by saying Disability Culture Lab is a nonprofit disability media and narrative lab. And I'll start from the place by saying that we love disabled people. I love disabled people.
Yeah.
We do too.
We exist to celebrate disability culture, disabled people, and to fight ableism. We're building out communications infrastructure by and for disabled people because bad stories lead to bad policy. And for too long, we've had bad stories about disabled people that have been told. That's what I grew up on. I think that's what a lot of us have grown up on. And as we know, it's led to a lot of really awful policy for a lot of years. And we haven't had real investment in our storytelling infrastructure really since the passage of the ADA, if not before. And we deserve to be able to tell our stories on our terms ourselves.
That's right.
And that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Well, part of telling stories, I think, is a good segue to talk about Disability Culture Lab's new summer collection, which is called We're Still Here, Fashion Against Fascism. What was the starting point for this collection, and what made it the right moment to create it?
Oh, yes. Well, when we're talking about telling stories, we want to tell stories across the board. So, we do a little bit of PR, and we do some stuff online, and we do digital stuff, and we work with creators. But art is a really big part of storytelling, and I think sometimes we leave art out. But the reality is that art is how we sort of like see and feel and kind of experience the world and joy and liberation. And if you really want to talk about changing things, you have to be able to see and feel and imagine it. However it is that you experience the world, because obviously we all experience it differently. You don't have to be able to do one of those things. You have to be, but we all experience the world in some way, and art is one of those ways. So Fashion Against Fascism is that for us. This particular line started with this beautiful North Star visioning process that we've been doing across the disability community. About a year ago, we were in this moment in time where we were looking around us and we said, okay, we're doing a lot of resistance. We're sort of moving from funeral to funeral. We're doing a lot of mourning. We're moving from crisis to crisis and mutual aid to mutual aid. And, I think each of us had lost a lot of folks, and sometimes we were doing like multiple mutual aids at once. It just felt like we were sort of like bogged down from crisis. And we were like, okay, if we're just moving from between, rapid response and crisis and incrementalism all we're doing really is sliding backwards in the disability
Yeah.
movement, right? Like we're never really moving forwards. And what we really need is space to be able to imagine what winning looks like. And if when we are trying to move forward, we don't know what winning is, then what are we moving towards?
Yeah.
And if we just, as like whatever, the 5 of us that exist at the Disability Culture Lab say, okay, this is what we think winning looks like. What does that mean? What, right? Like, you know, sure, like what Meier thinks winning looks like, great for me, but actually not that helpful. We said, what if we brought together a lot of folks from across a lot of different spaces and brought them together and could really figure out what winning looks like from a lot of folks from across a lot of different vantage points. So we brought together folks from across a lot of different disability justice spaces, disability rights spaces, artists, academics, folks who've been in their thoughts, to be frank, and then also folks who've been doing the doing, organizers, and activists and mutual aid organizers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you know, thinkers and doers, et cetera. And we all came together and we had 6 different sessions. First, we had a big kickoff meeting where we had maybe like 50 or 60 folks on. We did a lot of thinking of who should be in the room. We probably did 2 months of just nominations. Folks who should be in the room. Then we did a big kickoff meeting. We were really honored to have even some incredible folks like Alice Wong on the call for the kickoff meeting. We wish she had been there for the whole process.
Yeah.
And then we did 6 sessions with, 10 to 12 folks on each of those sessions where folks just sat and said, okay, what's winning look like? We did small groups in that kickoff meeting. And then we did these sessions where we just said, okay, what's winning look like? What are the myths that we're up against? What are, what's the problem that we're trying to solve in the world? Things that we really want to see if we could imagine anything, like if we had liberation, if we really had freedom. And we took notes. Those groups appointed a community editor that could represent them in the editing process. And then those community editors over the course of 3 or 4 months boiled down all of that into this North Star vision. And we took some of the big ideas that came out of that and we turned that into art. And some of that art sort of represents the problems that we're trying to solve and the world that we're in, and some of it represents sort of the vision of liberation that we want to see in the world. And that's how this collection came about. I'm wearing one of those shirts today, which is a beautiful piece by Jodi J, who's an amazing queer indigenous artist out of New Mexico, that we call oppression is disabling, and it says colonialism is disabling, capitalism is disabling, racism is disabling, and it kind of just circling through. And it's this beautiful sort of like sun-like design that's so cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's
Wow.
cool, yeah.
And whenever I'm wearing it in public, people are like, "Oh, wait, I get it."
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that's the point, right?
Thanks.
Yeah.
So this is so gorgeous. And then some of them, there's one that's this great piece by Sky Kubikub that just says interdependence is revolutionary. That was one of the big that came out, that DJ can ground us in this moment, that we can't, diversity alone is not going to help us fight against fascism. What we really need is diverse, interdependent communities in this moment to fight back against fascism. And that disability justice actually gave us the seeds to fight back against this moment. And we need to learn those lessons right now. And that is how we actually start fighting back, is by weaving interdependence into our communities, not diversity alone.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
there's a lot of really beautiful stuff that came out of this that I think are lessons for across the progressive movement, not just a North Star for our own community and the disability community.
Sure.
Excellent. That's so cool.
But you said that, this collection came out of all these big conversations with this group of people. What were some of the themes, hopes, or concerns that kept coming up in these conversations?
I mean, a lot of them we put on shirts, which is exciting, so you can see them out there.
Yeah.
And then some of them were, it was interesting. So I think this piece of interdependence and care, I think, was so important. That disabled people are both caregivers and care receivers, and that both have value. And that if we see the equal value in both, that we can start to build this interdependence into our communities. And that is actually how we fight back against fascism and authoritarianism. And if we ignore that, then we lose. And I think that actually was really wove across a lot of our different spaces. That that people deserve meaningful work regardless of whether or not we can earn a wage. I think really powerful and really important that folks want to be able to meaningfully contribute to our communities, even if we can't earn wages, and that we have value regardless of whether we're giving or receiving care within our communities. And that when we build that in, like, we have better and more meaningful lives, all of us, whether we're giving care, whether we're receiving care, whether we're in a community that has care that is being given or receiving, that this like care economy is actually, whether it's an economy or not, this care community is actually a huge part of what it means to build meaningful communities. And joyful communities. I think sometimes folks try to separate that out into something that's separate then, where it's just like a piece of the world, but it's actually like this core of everything, I think, that we are.
Yeah.
And then there were things that just like blew everything up. And one thing that just blew everything up in every discussion and derailed every conversation, non-disabled parents. Woo!
Yeah.
Now the conversation would continue when like not disabled parents came up. You know, I think there's like a lot of pain in our community about like certain topics, and non-disabled parents speaking on behalf of disabled people. And I think especially like in the influencer space, in the public space, and the kind of like negative narratives that have been put forward by non-disabled parents. So much deep pain, I think, in our community by some of these harmful myths that have been put forward by certain members of our community. That have oftentimes been put forward as allies, but in reality have caused just like immense pain. And I think there are a lot of lessons there, even within our own community, of like, what does it mean when we feel like we have allies, and what does it mean to show up with folks who say that they're allies? And maybe we need to do a little bit more challenging, even within disability spaces, when we see, you know, bad narratives that are causing harm, because that harm is so deep. We had, I think, probably half of our sessions were just derailed for more than half an hour of just like pain. Like we just needed to hold space for the pain.
Oh gosh, wow, that's it. Sounds like some of those sessions were really interesting and really intense. Wow. Well,
and that you learned a lot.
We
and learned a lot. Yeah,
a lot
for sure. Well, one thing you touched on a little bit was the shirt designs that came out of this. So a lot of the designs use very direct, like public messages such as "Disabled joy is revolutionary," "Love disabled trans folks out loud," "Build disabled community power." How did y'all think about turning these big community ideas into these messages that people can now actually wear?
Ooh, I think a lot of it had to do with like plain language. What does it mean? Plain and compelling language. And so, you know, our editors helped a lot when we were boiling stuff down. So, you know, we started by just being like, okay, where are the themes that we're seeing across all of these sessions? Because we have a lot of content, obviously. You know, you're talking about like, what do you see that's being repeated across a lot of spaces? And disabled leadership, disabled power, that was huge. People want representation, but folks want more than representation, right? Like representation is not enough, which is, I think, why we had build disabled community power there. Folks don't want representation. They want representation that includes like our ideas and our community's power being built, right? Yes, and we want representation that includes our vision for liberation. Like, I think that there's like a step beyond representation that we're in this moment. And we tried to capture that in the way that we had our shirts. And I think that's the same with interdependence. It's like, yes, we want interdependence, and like interdependence means something in this moment beyond interdependence for interdependence's sake. That like in this moment, interdependence is actually is not just survival for disabled people. It might be survival for all of us if we want. If we want to move beyond authoritarianism, and authoritarianism might not just mean like the end of our democracy as we know it, but also maybe the end of our planet as we know it, to be frank. Like,
that's sadly true. Yeah.
And if we want to fight back against this, like interdependence is revolutionary for us as individuals, like the way that we view ourselves, the way that we view our communities, the way that we view like how we fit in. Like, it's not just about independence. Like independence isn't as revolutionary, I think, as the right wants us to believe it is. Like bootstrap, actually revolutionary idea. Like none of us got here alone, and trying to like valorize that is not actually, it's not so cool. To be frank, like you never did it alone, right? Like none of us did it alone.
Yeah.
And I think it is ultimately like a very eugenic idea that bootstraps are somehow like a cool thing that you could pull yourself up alone, because no one ever did it in the first place. And it was never true.
Yeah.
You always had public roads. You always had public infrastructure, public internet, public power, public everything that got people to where they are. Families, communities, investment in white wealth by governments over many years. And like that interdependence is what has made any person who has immense wealth succeed. And everyone deserves the investment of their community and interdependence. And it shouldn't be exclusive to one group of people.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Well, my favorite is disabled joy is revolutionary, because as someone relatively new to the disability rights space outside my own, area, I had a lot of internalized ableism and not a lot of joy in it. And I'm learning that and learning for myself and being able to put that out there. So that shirt is just my absolute favorite. So fashion is often treated, surface level, but clothing can also be about safety and identity and pride. How do you see streetwear helping people with disabilities claim public space?
Yes. Well, first, I just want to say, joy went through almost every group that we were in. And I think that I think that's so important, because I think a lot of us were told a story when you're young and disabled, any of us who are young and disabled, but also anyone who becomes disabled later in life also, where it's like, okay, now you need to focus on your basic needs. Yeah. And that's all you get, and I think I fall into this trap also, even as somebody who's like spent a lot of years therapy trying to get over it, where you're like, hey, now I'm just going to ask for like my basic necessity. I'm going to ask for a new scooter for the holidays instead of asking for anything else. You know what I mean? Because I need this basic necessity, and other people are asking for a massage or something, or for joy, not like a massage.
Right.
And I'm like, what I really need is like wheels so that I can like pick up my daughter from daycare.
Yeah.
And like this joy really ran through almost every session of like, no, we need more. And joy is actually a fundamental like piece of dignity. It's like a piece of what it means to live a dignified life.
Yes.
We don't, like, we need more than bread. We need bread and roses.
Yes.
Unity and joy were really critical across all of this, that like all of these pieces were critical. And so much of disability infrastructure in the United States is built to deny disabled people joy, and that we deserve more. Sorry, I just wanted to say that first.
No,
and then
it's important.
To your question, I apologize.
No, I love it.
No. Great points.
Can you repeat the question part of that, though?
How do you see the streetwear helping people with disabilities claim public space?
Oh, yes. This is one of my favorite pieces. And then I think, a piece of that is like, there are ways that people see us when we show up in public. I'm a visibly disabled person now. I've spent a lot of my life being not visibly disabled. I've been visibly disabled for like 7 years now. I've been invisibly or unapparently disabled for my entire life, though disability has been a huge shaping force in my life. I'd say probably the most dominant force in my life. It's definitely what radicalized me as a kid was, I'm part of the ADA generation, but I was not able to access the public education because of my public schools in rural Alaska, where I grew up, not being willing to honor the ADA as it stood. And I was almost kicked out numerous times of school because I couldn't get in the way that my body needed to get in, and I wasn't getting accommodations that I needed to stay in public school. And so I was separated from my family when I was 14 and institutionalized instead at a private school and in the lower 48. And that really shaped the way I thought about everything. And so for me, like, I think for me, like now, disability fashion and having a disability streetwear brand is like people see me and they read things into me when they look at me. And I like to be able to have my own definition of what disability means on my chest, my own words front and center, because folks read so much into what it means that I'm disabled. They read different things into my gender identity. They read different things into like what it means that I am disabled. You know, I like to talk about like the jump scare of like the what happened, you know, or like
Yeah.
that comes out almost anywhere you go, or like that I can see people that I have known for 20 years of my career and I'll wave at them, folks I knew from before I was in a chair, and they won't recognize me because all they see is the chair.
Yeah.
I think that the shirts for me are like a way to define my disability identity on my own terms. And I think it's something that folks don't expect, but that allows me to kind of have, for me, a political identity around what disability is to me. And I think for a lot of folks with non-apparent disabilities, it's a way to have a disability identity when it might not be read onto you. If that is something that is important to you, especially at times when you're okay with being read to have it, whether that is a solidarity identity or it is a personal identity. It kind of reminds me of like, I'm also a trans person and I'm now fairly visibly queer, to be frank, but I have not always been visibly queer. Before I came out as trans, I was still a queer human that was I've been pansexual, out as pansexual since I was bisexual, if you're older, since I was a teenager. And, you know, people are always like, but how do I look that way? Like, if I'm not like super visibly so, and you're like, well, you could wear a rainbow, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's also disability streetwear, right? Like, how do you, if I is disabled, if I don't, you know, if I don't have a visible disability, it's like, well, you can wear a shirt, you know, if you want, like, if you want to be identifiable to other community, you know, and that's the case in the queer community. You know, you can wear a shirt that says I'm gay and people will definitely know to hit on you. Yeah. It says, you know, that has disability community stuff, and folks will definitely know you're in community. And I think also part of disability streetwear is like a political identity that allows you to like build community. And that's important too.
Well, I've always loved to wear graphic shirts because I say this to my family a lot, you know, if people are going to stare at me, at least they're going to get a message. Instead of just a free look at my body, they're going to get the message of what's in my head too. So, you know, I love the use of graphic shirts and stickers all over my scooter just to kind of say, well, if you're going to look at this.
I love that so much. And I think I've talked to Nikki Brown Booker at Borealis about this a lot. Like, what does it mean to be a spectacle? Like, I sometimes am like, I am still coming to terms with that. Like, I'm one of two very visibly disabled parents at my daughter's school. And like, everyone knows who I am, but I don't know everyone's names.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm like, but they all recognize me. And I'm like, why does yeah. Because there's like two of us on wheels. And I feel very much at like a disadvantage. But sometimes I'm like, maybe I don't want to be a spectacle, but I can't opt out of reality.
Right.
That. Yeah. So like, if I'm going to be a spectacle, I love how you're saying that. Like, if you're going to be looking, I deserve for you to look on my terms.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Well, to even expand on that further, some of the designs in your collection speak to people with disabilities who, some of this is already talked about a little bit, people who are also LGBTQ+, immigrants, Black, Indigenous, people of color, or parts of other communities that face harm. So why was it important for this collection to show that disability is, you know, directly connected to these many different lived experiences?
I mean, for us, that's everything, you know. I'll start by saying, for me, you know, over 50% of trans people have a disability. And there are a lot of people who want to spread misinformation right now. And I won't even say just on the right. I think across the entire political spectrum about trans folks, saying that there's something wrong with trans people. And they say, you know, it's mental health stuff, or it's this, or it's that. And the reality is that when you look at the actual disabilities amongst the trans community, you've got like connective tissue disabilities, you know, you've got autoimmune disabilities, higher rates of cancer, higher rates of heart disease, higher rates of almost every disability caused by inflammation, because the actual stress of transphobia is disabling. It's incredibly disabling. You know, there is nothing wrong with trans people. Transphobia is disabling. Trans people are incredible, resilient, and should never have to be.
Absolutely.
Transphobia is toxic and awful. And that doesn't count, hate crimes and all the other ways, and increased policing and incarceration and violence and interpersonal violence that trans folks face, in addition to everything else. And that's the same across the board. When you look at marginalized folks, the disability rates rise. And when you look at multi-marginalized folks, those disabled rates rise higher and higher and higher. So when you look at Black women and Indigenous women, rates rise to over 30%. When you look at women, higher rates than men. When you look at almost every multi-marginalized population, the rates go up. And when you look at intergenerational marginalization, the rates go up. And the research shows that inflammation is probably a huge cause of that, and that the disabling effects of oppression increase over generations, in part because of what happens when folks are pregnant and have faced the stress of oppression. How that affects what happens in the womb, that keeps going. And also just because of the sort of day-to-day, like the risks that you face being an oppressed person in the United States, from police, from state violence in the workplace, from forced poverty, et cetera, et cetera. And ableism itself is disabling too, right? Once you are disabled by oppression, ableism itself is another form of oppression that is disabling. Yeah. And so for us, we don't want to leave that unsaid, because when you have bad stories about something, it leads to bad policy, right? And you can't, if the story about disability is, you can only, disability is an accident and it can only be fixed with GoFundMes and people just need money and then it's fixed.
Right.
Then the answer is a GoFundMe. But if that is not the case, and the answer and the actual problem is that many people enter disability through political choices of folks with power, folks with money, folks with influence, then the answer is not a GoFundMe. The answer is actually different political choice. The answer is organizing. The answer is power building.
Yeah.
And the answer is different stories. And a GoFundMe alone isn't going to fix it.
No.
And so we have to tell different stories. And we also, we deserve joy and revolution. And representation. And we have to tell the stories of folks who've been most impacted by a lot of these systems. And so we want, multi-marginalized disabled folks, which is our whole team. An all queer and disabled team, trans folks and Black and brown folks. We deserve to have representation in the disability community at the same rates at which we've been disabled by the systems in the United States.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
So,
well, to touch on the joy again a little bit, the collection is so great because it holds joy and resistance at the same time. How do you keep joy from being treated separately from serious advocacy, especially when people with disabilities, are facing real threats to rights and services and their own safety?
Oof. I mean, I think they just go hand in hand. I don't think you can separate it. And I think at the end of the day, we have this conversation internally at our organization all the time, especially for multi-marginalized disabled folks, and I think really almost all disabled folks, we get our lives are on the line, right? We're here, we're living it. We're in crisis, we're trying to balance a care budget that exceeds our rent and our mortgages. I had two friends thrown off Medicaid last week, one of which has dual citizenship in Canada, is moving. And a poor of whom doesn't know how they're going to meet where they're going to get caregivers now, right?
Well.
And, nobody, we're in crisis. We don't need anyone to tell us there's a crisis. I think the model of there's a crisis, everyone turn out is so important for folks who are coming from a place of deep privilege. And I don't think you can touch that. I get it for a mobilization point of view for folks with privilege. And I think for folks that are already in crisis, we've got folks that are on the edge who are in mental health crises because of that edge. And the mental health crisis is not separate from that edge. It's legitimate. It's like, I don't know if I can afford to live anymore. And we're seeing that in Canada right now, where people are choosing death because they can't afford to live.
Yeah.
And it's irresponsible to meet people with despair when they're in despair.
Yeah.
Our folks need a joy break. And we can organize we can give folks joy and then organize around a shared understanding of the crisis that we're in without needing to like bombard people with a deeper understanding of crisis. We know, you know? And so from our perspective, the joy is essential for being able to do the imagining of what winning looks like. And when we bring people together and do that imagining of liberation, for a lot of folks, it was the first time they were ever given space to imagine winning. They have lots of space to imagine the despair.
Right.
We have lots of space to imagine the crisis. We got that down. Like, we're on it.
Right. We got that.
So we're well educated on the crisis. And like, we need space for the joy, the imagining of winning. We need space to come together on that joy. And then and then we can organize together. We need, like, that's what we need. And I think different communities need different theories of change, so to speak. I know that's like a sort of academic-y term, but like, not everyone needs to organize in the same ways to win. And we all, we all can work together towards winning, and we all have different ways of doing that, communicating. And at the Disability Culture Lab, you know, we work across the community. We're building communications infrastructure across the disability community. So when we're working with disability rights groups, we don't necessarily need to work from a place of joy first, right? Sometimes they're organizing in communities with wealth. And we can just say, okay, great, let's define the crisis. Let's define your community. We can help you figure out how to communicate in that group. But when we're working in like multi-marginalized disabled communities, no, we're going to start from a place of joy. We're not going to go in to our own communities where folks are in crisis and say, did you know that you're dying?
Yeah, right.
You know?
Right.
Do you know your friends are being arrested? Like, on it. We got, like, let's get a little joy in our lives, and then we can come and organize together. I think we need both.
Yes.
Yes. Deserve both.
Definitely.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed.
Definitely.
Yeah. No, I love that answer. I love that. Well, so before we wrap up, listeners of the show know that we have a second segment called our Deep Cut, where we talk about media in disability spaces. And we like to ask our guests for their own deep cuts. Is there a film, a TV show, song, fashion project, artist, performance, any piece of media that has really resonated with you lately that you'd love to share with our listeners?
I have two right now that I've been really into, if you don't mind.
No,
please. No, it's great. Yeah. More the better.
The first one, my favorite rolling anthem right now is Extra L by Jenny and Jodi. And I've just been really loving. I think everyone deserves a rolling anthem if you're on wheels.
Yes.
Nice.
There's this line in it. It's top down foreign cars staring at the stars. Now my mobility scooter is made in China. So my top is always down, and I have a foreign car. And I can always stare at the stars. So I feel like I'm my best life per Jenny and Dodi's dreams. And
love it.
I really enjoy it. And Jodi, with her anxiety song, is also a great disabled icon.
Yes.
So I just love that song, and I love blasting it while riding my mobility scooter. I'm not supposed to listen to microphones while I'm in the bike lane, but also, I don't know if anyone else has this issue while scooting around town or wheeling around town, but sometimes people yell slurs at me. So I feel like it's better for my mental health to just headphones on.
There you go.
That's
sure.
their decision. Everyone can make their own choice for their health and safety, but the trade-off of my health and safety of having the headphones on is just better for me.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I can see that.
And then just for a movie, it's making the festival circuit right now. But Aijen Poo and Lydia Story have a new documentary that they are co-producing right now called Take Me Home that is so beautiful. It's a new a documentary on care. An amazing woman whose name I'm forgetting at this exact moment in time. Forgive me, but please look it up. On her care journey as a caregiver for her.
Oh, wow.
Not as a care receiver, but also like care getting, care receiving, but the sort of circle of what it means to both give and receive care.
Nice.
And
all right.
We talked about this a lot actually in the disability North Star visioning sessions of like what it means to like give, get, and exist sort of in the care space all at the same time. And we're really excited about this film that's currently on the festival circuit, but hopefully will soon be available for all of us to watch.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, can't wait.
For race and disability justice, the Care Club sandwich instead of the sandwich generation. Like the club sandwich generation.
There you go.
So, Take Me Home. I'm very excited for it to come out to wider release.
Cool. Yeah, me too. Wow. All right.
Definitely gonna look that up. Two good choices.
Answers. Love it. Absolutely. Well, Meier, thank you so much for being our guest. You really exude the things that you talk about, which is I see the joy, I can feel the joy in you, and then also that resistance and that strength. So we're so glad you're out there fighting the fight, and thanks so much for being on our show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to you both. It was so amazing to be in community with you both today, and thank you to everybody who's tuning in. Please come follow us at disabilityculturelab.org. We're over on Instagram and Blue Sky, and we've got an amazing shop over at shop.disabilityculturelab.org. We'd love to stay in community with all of you also.
Yes.
Excellent. Very cool. We'll have links to all that in our show notes. So
absolutely.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's take this dive a little further. Deep cut ahead.
For today's Deep Cut, we're talking about the Netflix limited series, All the Light We Cannot See. This story follows Marie Laure, a young woman who is blind, living in occupied France during World War II.
This series has received a lot of criticism, including around storytelling, pacing, and representation. So today we want to look at it through a disability lens and ask what it shows, what it misses, and what larger conversations it opens up.
The series made an important choice by casting actors who are blind or have low vision as Marie Laure. At the same time, the show also faces criticism how blindness is portrayed and how fully the character is developed. That seemed to give us room to talk about both things at once, the value of authentic casting and the need for disabled characters to be written with agency, complexity, and care.
Yeah, so today we are talking about All the Light We Cannot See as a complicated media pairing. It gives us a chance to talk about blindness on screen, access for audiences, and the larger history of how people with disabilities were treated under fascist systems.
Okay, so one of the most important choices that the series makes was casting Aria Mia Loberti and Nell Sutton, actors who are blind or have low vision, as, the main character, Marie Laure. That's so important. We've talked about that before, but the series also got criticism about the storytelling and pacing and representation. How do we hold both of those things at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And, so if we start with the casting, it's certainly, to not minimize things too much, the casting was important. It was meaningful that they did seek out actors who are blind and low vision, because they're often left out of those roles, right? I mean, so often in Hollywood, the role of someone who is blind is played by a sighted person. So the fact that they cast someone, again, blind or low vision, I think is very, very important. But you can have strong casting, but it doesn't really solve the issues with the writing, right? The writing is the writing, whether the actor is great or not. I think, it's two separate things. And I think each thing should be kind of reviewed on its own merit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The series is based on a book, which I have not read the book, so I'm not sure how the author, cared for the character in the book. But, there's always these conversations about how film and TV shows are based on a book and they deviate from it, right?
Sure.
There was such an opportunity for them, the writers, to really dig deep into this character and really make her, and the other characters for that matter, big, deep, rounded characters. And I don't know, I think they kind of fell short on that. I think trying to get such a big story into a miniseries, it was hard for them to do, and it was rushed. So the character kind of development, unfortunately, suffered, in my opinion, on that.
Yeah, I mean, we learned that Marie-Laure is definitely a brave individual, and has been spent a lot of time growing up, unfortunately, in it wasn't always occupied by Germany, but throughout her life, the Germans have sort of been advancing through France, and so you see, how she became like, sort of a resilient person, but there isn't a lot else we know about her, actually, right? Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, so the series gives us some specific ways that Marie-Laure experiences the world, right? There's the model of Saint-Malo, there's radio, sound, touch, and her memory of things. What parts of that portrayal felt really grounded, and which parts felt a little more simplified or even just maybe symbolic?
I love the model. I felt like that was a very grounded part for her. It showed, it wasn't just... it was symbolic in the way, but it touched her memory. It told her something about the relationship with her father. It gave her a practical way to understand, where she was. So to me, it was like rooted in access and preparation and trust in her abilities, as opposed to, the trope of helplessness,
Right.
And I also liked the fact that she used a transistor radio. And that worked for me because it gave her a voice in the film. She was listening and communicating and sharing information and connecting to people, beyond her home. And so it took where there was the lack of vision to the sound being, amplified in the way that, she dealt with the world. And how she participated with it, and it influenced the story.
Yeah. Sound and also her memory became really important parts of how she kind of moves through the world of the story. I guess where it gets weaker is that sometimes, the series leans really hard on, the danger, the innocence that she has, the bravery of her and other characters. In wartime, essentially, but there was very little of ordinary life, right? Like frustration, humor, anger, etc. And the relationships, of course, also, there's several, without getting into, deep into the plot and spoilers, there's, a lot of relationships that get sort of formed, in the miniseries, but they kind of they're kind of there and they kind of happen, and there's not a ton of background or, other, I don't know, depth to it,
Yeah, they're little islands upon themselves, and then you move past it in the plot, and then you're never really brought back to it.
Yeah.
I also feel like the fact that she's blind was used to amplify some of the danger. And that kind of bothered me a little bit. The situation is dangerous upon itself.
Sure.
And I think it was kind of used to heighten the suspense for the audience. And so then it felt more like a dramatic device than, being authentic to her life, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, it does. It does. And I agree that is sort of a, can be a problem with making a film like this, is that it's kind of hard to avoid that if it's going to have that aspect of, fear and that element of suspense. If the individual was blind, it's going to play into that, I guess. And it's not, it's sort of, and it's also sadly kind of I'd say almost kind of a cliche.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
think so.
Yeah.
So the series included audio description, and it's something that we're seeing, more and more of. And Netflix also released the audio description featurette. So for listeners who may not know, audio description is spoken narration that describes key visual details between the dialogue. So people who are blind or have low vision can follow the action, the setting, expressions, and other visual parts of the show or film. Why does access matter in a series like this, do you think?
Well, I mean, access always matters, period. But, I like that it's because the individual, the star is blind, it would be a real, it would have been a disaster if the types of accessibility features like audio description had not been used or had been ignored. Thankfully they did it. And that's good. The access is definitely, if you're going to represent the main character in the miniseries as being someone with a disability, then I think providing that access to people with the same disability has to be a given. And it's not always, obviously, most of the time it's not. But it's good to see when it is. It matters a lot, especially I think because the main character is blind and there's so much visual detail. So to have that audio description of, to really sort of explain to that individual who's, trying to experience the miniseries, what the radio room is like maybe, or the bombing, there's a jewel that's sort of one of the key pieces of the plot. Just the vibrancy and shape of the jewel, you need to explain that with audio description. And it's great they did.
Yeah. It seems obvious, but some of the people that are going to want to see this movie are the people that are going to be feeling represented in it, which are people who are blind and have low vision. So to not have a full experience for them would just be devastating. So, the representation that we're asking for on screen needs to also be for the audience, who are making this piece of art for. So, and the other part to it is one of the main plots is sound for her, through the radio. So because it relies so much on sound, audio description kind of, it feels connected into how the story is being told anyway. So it's kind of just like a natural thing that should be there.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. Well, because the story is set in World War II, there's a larger disability history here that matters, right? Nazi ideology targeted people with disabilities through forced sterilization, institutionalization, and murder. When a story from this period includes a main character with a disability, what responsibility does it have to acknowledge that history, even if it's maybe not the main plot of the show?
Yeah, there were a few moments where she's having conversations and she mentions, that she's different, right? Quote unquote different. Yeah. So we see that she understands how her blindness, affects how the world responds to her. But I'm not sure that the audience is given enough context to understand what that means in the time period that she's living.
Right.
This may be someone's first film where World War II is talked about, where, Nazi policies are talked about. And so, you don't really see the danger when you just say, well, I'm different. You think in the context of, the world you live in now, what being different means. So I really would have liked to have seen a little bit more of, what the threat of, occupations of soldiers and searching and bombing does within those, the Nazi policies for her, and what real danger she and other people with disabilities were under. I think they fell short in that explanation.
Yeah, I think they did too. And, there's several, I guess I'd say. I'm not sure how many exactly, but there's certainly more than one, more than 2 or 3 times that she encounters a Nazi officer or whatever, a Nazi soldier, I guess just should say. And they recognize in those cases, and I think each of those instances, that she is blind, but nobody, like, not one of them is like trying to take her or something because of it.
Yeah.
I mean, they all sort of let it pass for whatever reason. And it's like, I don't know. I kind of wondered about that myself. Like, is that accurate? Or would they, if they had encountered her actually, would they have been like, no, you're coming with us
immediately,
taking her away immediately? That never happened. And again, that's under multiple encounters. So, I get it for the plot. She had to be there, but is that accurate? Is that really? So again, the viewer gets a sort of unclear idea of how disability was looked at, because here they're just acknowledging it and move. I mean, there is one character that does refers to her as being sort of a flawed individual, or there is some language that implies it, but it's in and of itself, it's not really enough to get that clear picture, like you're saying.
Yeah. And, you don't want a big history lesson and, stop the plot moving forward to do all that. But, even a conversation, between her and her father.
It could have been
about,
a line.
What danger they're in, and again, the book could have totally gone into that, but they really, they really fell short, I think, in the series for it.
Agreed.
So this brings us back to Meier and Disability Culture Lab's, summer streetwear collection. We're still here, Fashion Against Fascism, because that phrase carries a lot of meaning when we think about disability, survival, visibility, and the right to exist safely in community. So how does All the Light We Cannot See help us talk about disability and survival, even when the representation itself feels a little bit more complicated?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question and a great, I think, tie-in as well. So Marie Lohr's, radio broadcasts are a very clear example of disability and voice and resistance sort of all intersecting. She uses that radio to reach beyond the walls of her house. She takes part in something larger than herself, and it's a way to get out there, reach out, communicate that is independent of her disability, but yet also, it's a good fit for her disability. She's still able, because she has voice, she can use that voice through the radio, and, it doesn't really matter in that instance whether she can see or not. So that intersection is a good, it works really well for her. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the series, lets us understand that people with disabilities have always been part of history and always been part of the resistance, even when, history kind of leaves those experiences out. I felt like she, wasn't only trying to stay alive, she's making herself heard. She's taking part in what's going on around her. And, that connects strongly to the idea of resistance being something that's, active and not passive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this miniseries is certainly not perfect, but I think it does still help us sort of look into see that intersection and recognize it, ask better questions about it. I think it's, I think that's an important aspect that they did do well.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. Well, the series gives us a lot to discuss, right? Including the casting, access, character development, and the relationship between disability and history. So, Jodi, what do you hope future stories about people with disabilities in historical settings maybe do differently?
Well, I'm a big history buff, so most of the time I'm watching something that has to do with history. And, I hope they stop treating disability as if it means the same thing in every place and every time period, because it's very different. Even today with the laws that we have in this country versus laws that are in other countries. So, a character's disability and lived experience is unique to them and the world around them. and the attitudes of the era. And I don't think this series helped people understand, like we were just saying, how dangerous that time period was for her. So I'd like to see them, not pause for a history lesson, but kind of ground the audience into what's fully at stake. You kind of felt like what this soldier was looking for from her that he thought she had, without giving you spoilers. That's one part of the danger that she was under. There was so much more that just really wasn't touched. So I'd really like them to really ground the character in the space that they're in and the time that they're in, and what's going on around them. I feel that, and it's not just this series. I feel like a lot of series do that. I'm not throwing the whole thing on the shoulders of this one, but
Sure.
I think that we really need to pull that into focus.
Absolutely. I agree. There's things that, the movie did well. And I think the connection to history, unfortunately, it didn't do all that well. And, they could have gone further. And, the disability shouldn't be separate from the culture of the time, because it's a piece of it like everything else. I mean, the interaction of disability we talk about so many things. I mean, one thing maybe doesn't come up a lot, but there's the interaction between disability and our history and politics and things like that are just as important. And maybe wasn't fully there in the film.
So when we talk about disability representation, what questions should audiences be asking beyond, and we've talked about this a lot, was a person cast with, a disability in this role? There's more questions that could be asked. What do you think those could be?
I mean, first of all, did the character, have agency? Are they important? Do they represent their disability accurately and matter in a way that's unique to them and their disability in the story? Kind of like in like this did with various practical ways with like the model city, the use of radio. Those were practical things that really did give us a good feel of her disability and how she interacts with the world. I like the model city a lot. I think that was amazing. And I really think that's one of the better plot points of the story was the fact that her dad had originally done it in one place. And now again, when they're in San Malo, did it again. He goes through and he builds that model. And I think that's just, it did show a lot of how much he, really loves her and wants to see her succeed. So, for some of the faults we've talked about, I do think there's elements that really, that was one that I think was actually really worked and was touching. But there's plenty more. I mean, like, did the story give the character, better relationships out there besides just protection and danger? And that's one where, we're not so sure about with this one. This one, I just mentioned the exception, but that's an exception. I think overall they didn't do as great a job, right? So what are some others?
Well, what you just said made me kind of think about, we've talked about Bridgerton before, and there's a character in this last season that had a limb difference, and, she's in there working, and they could have left it very, she's a maid in this household. There we are, here's our character. But they gave her a relationship with another person that she works with. So, we saw her develop as a character, and, she wasn't just in the background. That's how you do it. Like, she wasn't the main part of the story at all, but we were still getting these little nuggets of her life and her, living this full life. And, it's just those little things that are, can easily be done. And also, we talk about this too, them being involved in the writing process, being involved behind the camera, be involved in, marketing for Netflix. They could have marketed this in such a way. I hadn't even heard about this till I was really digging, trying to find, topics for the deep dive.
Me
so
too,
that's such a shame, It could have really been marketed well. So I think, people with disabilities or, just this similar life experiences to characters need to be involved from beginning, through the end. So hopefully we'll see that changing more and more as we go.
Yes, indeed. I hope so.
So for us, this deep cut is not just about whether all the light we cannot see worked as an adaptation. It's about what happens when disability is placed inside a story about war, fear, resistance, and survival.
And it's also about asking for more access, more depth, more complexity, more stories where people with disabilities are not just symbols of hope or hardship, but fully realized people with power, culture, and a future. That's our episode for today. A huge thank you to Meier Galblum Haigh for joining us and sharing more about Disability Culture Lab. We're still here, and the power of fashion, art, and community in disability culture.
This conversation reminds us that clothing can be more than style. It can be a message, a form of care, and a way for people with disabilities to claim pride, belonging, and visibility.
If this conversation stayed with you, we hope you'll share it with someone else. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Disability Deep Dive is a podcast that is brought to you by Disability Rights Florida, where real conversations about life, culture, and ideas meet the lived disability experience. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us at disabilityrightsflorida.org/podcast.